title slide identifies the session as Engaging Expecting and Parenting Teens in Child Welfare.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for session B3, Engaging, Expecting, and Parenting Teens in Child Welfare. Before we get started, my co-facilitator and I will introduce ourselves. My name is Lenita Berry. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a recent UNC Charlotte graduate. Yay! Go Niners! I have lived experience in the foster care system as a pregnant and parenting youth, and I am now a current young adult consultant with the center. Now I will turn it over to my co-facilitator to introduce herself.
Thank you so much for that, Lenita. Hello, everyone. My name is Antonica Frazier. My pronouns are she, hers, and hers, and I am currently located in Albany, Louisiana. I am a graduate from Southeastern Louisiana University with 2 bachelor's degrees in criminal justice and sociology. And I am one of the Division X consultants here serving on the Division X Technical Assistance Project, was coming to an end this week, which I'm so sad about, but I will not be leaving. You will all be seeing my face. I have experience in leading some of the peer events that you all might have attended. One of the recent ones was supporting special populations, and I'm excited to be speaking with you all today. I also have lived experience in child welfare, and I'm just so glad that you all are here joining us for today. So for our icebreaker, we just have a quick icebreaker question.
An agenda for this session is displayed on screen: welcome, introductions, and objectives, overview, expecting and parenting teens, breakout group activity, reflections, and closing.
Please feel free to share your name in the chat, your state, your role, and answer the following question. When you hear the word expected and parenting teens, what comes to mind? I'm just going to give you all about 2 minutes because we have a really fun session for today. But for me, when I hear the word expected and parenting teens, what comes to mind for myself is thinking about what resources are available for this special population, what needs might need to be addressed that might not be, what are some things that are available to them that could be beneficial for them. Are their needs being met as far as their prenatal needs? Are they going to their appointments? Do they have the medications if they need them? Do they have support? Do they have housing, financial assistance, and things like that? Those are some things that comes to my mind when I think about expecting and parenting teens. Lenita?
Yeah, I would have to definitely agree. My personal experience, the reason why I had to even go into care was because I was so young when I got pregnant, and none of my local doctors would see me for liability reasons. So definitely prenatal care is absolutely important.
Now, as folks are joining in, you're more than welcome to drop your answers into the chat. I think I see a couple of responses already. I'm just going to read about maybe 1 to 2 of them. I see some of them. What comes to mind is of what's needed to be successful. How can we support all aspects? A population who has a lot of stigmas against them, which is one of the things that we will be mentioning about today. Thinking about what can I do to support so that they can be a successful parent without their child coming into care, which is awesome. And I thank you. I see tons of you are participating to the chat, which is amazing. But for the sake of time, we're going to be moving right along to our agenda. So for our agenda today, we'll just be, which we already done, going over our welcomes, introductions. We'll be doing a brief overview about expecting and parenting teens, looking into some of those stats and facts and factors. We'll also be doing a nice breakout group activity, which we're excited about, and going over reflections and closing. Next slide, please. So our overview of expecting and parenting teens. So for background and context setting, what do we know? Well, we do know that youths who are expecting and parenting teens are involved in care, they have an increased risk for negative outcomes. Some of those, just being involved in care, and we're thinking about those negative outcomes, we're thinking about what are those risks that are associated with them being involved into care. We're thinking about what are those issues, what are those things that develops through time. We're also thinking about those stigmas, as some of you mentioned earlier in the chat. There are stigmas that are associated with just the term of expected and parenting teens. This beautiful population, they are facing those negative stereotypes, those derogatory labels that have really dominated the perception and expectations of expectant and parenting teens. They come from multiple sources, that includes mass media, pregnancy prevention programs, even adults who work with youth and young adults. But because of those negative stigmas that are associated with the population, they can generate negative feelings. So when we're thinking about those negative feelings that they have, expectant and parenting teens, it can affect their personal identities because they become intertwined with those negative stigmas that have been associated just for their group alone. So as a result, they may develop negative feelings that affects their well-being, that affects their mindset. Some of those feelings may turn into shame, to blame, loneliness, and fear. They might have insecurities that might feel even humiliated, just the idea of them being pregnant at such a young age. They might have resentment, not only towards their friends, their families, but for themselves. They might have feelings of annihilation, being put into a box because they might feel like they are so different because they are young and that they are pregnant, that they're expecting, but they're now, once you become pregnant, it's now no longer just about them, but now it's about them caring for a child, learning how to care for another child. Well, some of them still might be children themselves. This is already a huge battle for them. This is already a huge challenge for them. So some of those challenges that they may also experience is navigating through the system, the lack of trust, not enough representation and data, not enough resources, the lack of support, having successful permanency and stability. These are challenges that expectant and parenting teens that they struggle with. So how can we help them? What are those tools and resources that we can provide to them to help lessen the challenges that they face? What can we do to get rid of those negative stigmas, that is attached to just even the terms themselves? What can we do to better the future for expectant and parenting teens, which we're hoping this session will be able to give us some of those answers. Next slide, please. When we're looking into, when it comes to expectant parenting teens, there are a lot of statistics and facts, but some of these that we took the time to go through extensive research to collect, we wanted to give to you all today. Now, as we go over these stats and facts, I just want us to also keep these in mind, because when we go into our breakout room activities, we're going to be thinking about what are the current challenges and issues that expectant parenting teens face, and how can we come up with those key strategies and solutions. So according to a national conference legislative report, girls in foster care give birth at a rate more than 50% higher than girls in just the general population. 1 in 4 girls who were in foster care at the age of 17 had given birth before their 20th birthday. That's struggling. Only 50%, only 50%. Oh, yes. Hold on. I'm sorry. Technical issue. My screen froze for just a moment. According to a 2010 study, only 50% of young mothers get a high school diploma by the age of 22, compared with 89% of women who did not have a child during their teen pregnancy. And some of these numbers I find shocking to me. Even pregnant and parenting young mothers also face difficulties with housing stability. Some studies have shown that even only 10% of homeless girls living on the street or in shelters are pregnant. These are just some of the data that we have collected. Lenita, I know you might have some things that you might even want to add to this.
Yeah, it's definitely shocking numbers. And while we were doing research, it's just really sad that states aren't even required to have data. So when these high numbers kept on popping up. It was just really shocking.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please.
A slide titled How to Engage Expecting and Parenting Teens displays 4 suggestions: create peer network groups, share digestible data and interpretation, build beneficial relationships, establish multiple feedback loops.
I will now be passing this piece over to Lanita.
Thank you. So now that you heard the data, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties as well. Uh-oh. Now that you've heard the data, how can we effectively engage pregnant and parenting youth in CQI and CFSR processes? Next slide, please. I'm sorry, you was on the right slide. It just took a moment for my, look, technical difficulties, yay. So depending on the state, an already established youth group and peer network has already been created. Please take the time and connect with groups, or if the opportunity arises, connect young parents to these networks to give them more support and really become allies with these organizations. As mentioned earlier, a challenge that states have is not having data that is digestible enough so it can be interpreted to really include pregnant parenting teens. Investment in the workforce is highly encouraged, but also leaning into stakeholders with lived experience who can be brought on to help with these issues. Feel free to also use this time to train and onboard alumni and youth so they can be better acclimated to partner with the agency and the jurisdiction. It is our hope that as data becomes more accessible and user-friendly, it will lead to more policies and better practices for pregnant and parenting teens. But before any agency worker can interact with teens of this population, it is very, very important to build relationships. Please build relationships. Many people have had bad experiences with the system. So it's very important to come from a place that's genuineness. And so that people won't feel like they are being a token within the processes that you potentially will include them on. If not, all efforts will seem futile and it will not be mutually beneficial. And we don't want that. Let's be honest. We do not want that. Remember to create a bond with your youth or alumni that is rooted in trust, accountability, partnership, and transparency. Yes, transparency. The last point that I want to include is establish multiple feedback loops. Excuse me. Everyone will be on a different wavelength on how they would like to be engaged. The best method is to make sure that each jurisdiction encourages more than one way to offer guidance and input. This also reinforces inclusivity and shows that your agency is really striving to be better in its line of communication, and most importantly, its connection to the community. Next slide, please. Factors to consider when you're engaging pregnant and parenting teens include racial equity and inclusion, equal opportunities and equitable pay, and reasonable accommodations and alternatives, and transparency, as I mentioned earlier. Pregnant and parenting teens that have experience in foster care might feel alienated from their cultures, beliefs, and practices. Please encourage them to be their authentic selves by providing a psychological safe environment for them to do so. Please try not to limit engagement to a certain type of person and allow room for all individuals to participate. Often there is a disconnect between resources, implementation, and how or who even receives those services. As you engage with pregnant and parenting youth, keep in mind that their expertise is unique and valuable. Their knowledge can fill in gaps that just might not show up in traditional means of information collection. And that's one of the reasons why their expertise is so valuable. This is why opportunities specific to this population should be available, and their services should be paid enough that would not upset their home environments. It is highly encouraged that the first official interaction for engagement should be around building connections. It's also important to set time to discuss current practices, policies, and procedures that are used to work with pregnant and parenting populations. Consider going over the history, why it was decided to make those decisions, talk about improvements over the years and successes, and discuss the needs of the agency. Also, leave room for pregnant and parenting teams to highlight any gaps that they might see. Next slide.
A slide titled Breakout Group Activity poses questions for consideration and reflection, which include: what are the biggest challenges and successes with these populations? What strategies have you used or would you like to use with this population? How has your jurisdiction over challenges? After hearing the information from today's session, what can you do to engage with expectant and parenting teams? What are some common themes from breakout groups? After today, what strategies and areas of opportunities can your respective agency and state improve upon? Are there ways to develop existing practices within your jurisdiction to help with engagement?
So now that we have set the stage and provided context, we're going to transition into our breakout rooms to discuss the following: strategies that help with engagement of expecting parenting teams, challenges and successes, and ways to really improve engagement. We will have a discussion for about 10 minutes, and we will come back and have reflections and then close out.
So for our first question, we would like to know, what are the biggest challenges and successes with this population? So just from having just from going over those few stats and facts earlier today, what would you think are those additional biggest challenges and successes for expectant and parenting teams? Gaining trust with the youth. That's awesome. Yes, that's definitely one of those challenges I've heard. Communication barriers, they feel judged. That's good. Not knowing or having resources. Yes. So I see some common things are trust. The trust issue, is it that expectant and parenting teens might not be as open to trusting adults, or do you think it's vice versa? Does it work both ways? Establishing boundaries. Yes. Their families, the stigma, the resources, especially in rural areas. I hear a lot that youth and young adults in rural areas might not know a lot of the resources that are out there and that exist, that might not be exposed to them. There might not be that connection of how can we get these resources to youth and young adults in rural areas. That's always has been a topic of how can we better that? How can we better getting those services out to them? There's often that feeling of lack of support from their families to another parent. Yes, it's great that you mentioned that. And I see several of you have mentioned about the lack of support with your family members, because, a lot of times, we might not, I'm not going to just say we, but I think it's probably a difficult situation for a young teen to find out that they're pregnant, especially if their home life is not the best environment for them. What is that young person supposed to do? Especially when you're thinking about a young person who might not have a stable home life, who might not have permanent connections. How are they going to get resources? What are those ways that we can get those sources to them? How can we connect them to adults who do genuinely care about them, who would like to help them? How can we do that? I see connecting to what others might have said about the lack of support, that feeling of fear and being overwhelmed. There is this, it's me, for example, myself, full disclosure, I found that I was pregnant actually in college. I actually had my daughter, I found that I was pregnant my senior year of college, actually, which was a whole different ball game for me. It was getting that bigger space, trying to figure out what resources are available to me, getting the best prenatal care, which was a struggle, trying to get in touch with Medicaid. Like, there are these hurdles that us as young people have to cross to get to the certain amount of things. So what would be that way of making it easier for them? So I think this is awesome. I think this is good. Awesome. Reminding staff that just because a teen is in care and pregame, it does not need the baby needs to come into care. That is interesting. And I've heard that has been a challenge, when youth and young adults in care are pregnant, they do have babies, that their babies are automatically put into care. I've heard about that. And I don't know what is the underlying thing with that, but that is a concern. That is concerning for me too. But then it's also at the same time, I think it's the mindset of it's a child having a child. It's a teen that is in care, in state custody that's now having a baby. How could they provide for themselves and how could they provide for the child? So what would be those resources that could help a mother who is in care, who might be expecting, who is pregnant, who is now a parent? How can we better help them? That is a good point. People telling youth they will wind up like their mothers. Those are those things. That's what we were discussing. Those stigmas, those negative feelings, those things that people might say to teens, to children that have those lingering effects, and they might not even know that. Telling teens that they might wind up like their mothers when their mothers might not be involved in their lives. Their mothers might not be the great role model. When you say that to those teens, how do you think they're going to not respond, but react? How do you think they're going to react to hearing those negative things? How do you think that would help better them in their future of becoming a parent? Because they are not only dependent, have to take care of themselves, they now have to take care of someone else. When you have a child, they are solely dependent. They are solely dependent on you to meet all of their needs. So that was a great point. Challenges of finding parenting classes. I do not know that many parenting classes myself that is available, but I do know that there are some that are out there. Some of that. That's great. Any other points? Wonderful. As you all are answering the first question, let's think about the second question. What are strategies that you have used or would like to have used with this population? What are some of those strategies that you all might know that you could use with this population? Youth-centered goal settings, that's great. Establishing peer supports and connections, that's a good one. More group sessions, they often feel alone. Yes, see, there are some things that I thought about, what would help not only just expectant and parenting teens, but what would help all youth in care? With the idea of creating a mentor or peer support program, support group, would that maybe increase the stigmas with just even the label of being a foster youth? Would that help better them? Just thinking of what would be those ways, what would be a good way to help get the resource out, that peer-to-peer engagement. What would be the good way to do those things? Short-term goals, that's a good strategy. And engaging the father of the baby, that's also a good strategy as well. We all hear the saying, takes two to tango, but it takes two to, it's beautiful. Creating connections, yes. Strategic sharing, it's a good one. The whole family unit needs support. Yes, not only just the mother, but also the father needs help as well. I see a lot of parenting skills classes as the top strategy, which is awesome. I see co-parenting, which is big. We don't hear a lot about, we hear a lot about the mothers, but there's already this unfortunate negative stigma about fathers, the lack of fathers not always being involved in children's lives and things like that. We do hear that. There's not so much as a focal point to them, but I do believe that co-parenting support is important. All parties being involved, making sure that there's opportunities for both parents. Yes, collaborative learning opportunities for both parents. Yes, asking what they need and acknowledging them, connecting them with those resources that is accessible, not just for the mother, but also for the father as well. These are some good points. Good points. So as you all are thinking of those strategies, how has your jurisdiction overcome some of these challenges? What have been some solutions you all might have known or might have heard or might have seen that have been put in place to help overcome these strategies that are associated with expecting and parenting teens? As you all are putting to the chat, please feel free to, if you're able to unmute and share a few things. But I'm going to be passing this part over to Lanita.
Thank you. We have time for 2 people to unmute if you would like. "30 minutes went by quick." Oh no, people are having trouble unmute. I'm so sorry.
Hello?
Oh yes,
Oh,
yay.
yay.
Look at God, yay.
Hi, you guys. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time frame you are. Good morning. My name is Namisha Reynolds, and I work with You Gotta Believe. We're based here in New York and in all 5 boroughs, and including Westchester. So yeah, I don't think New York itself has done a lot with in our jurisdiction to actually overcome this. Being someone who has lived experience both in foster care and being a teen mom, I've experienced this 13 years ago now, and I don't see much change. It's more so that like they have created some more resources, but the problem is still the same, because what's happening is young women like myself are getting into homes where more often than not sexually abused, and then it just so happens that we choose certain partners on our own, and it becomes like a toxic and traumatic situation, and then we become pregnant without knowing all the ins and outs of ourselves, our bodies, and just kind of the trauma that we've experienced both in foster care and in the homes, and then not knowing much about ourselves, our womanly nature, and then becoming pregnant. I actually didn't know I was pregnant with my daughter until I was 3 months. So, and then at that point, it was kind of like, there's nothing you can do. And it was really, it was unfortunate in the sense that I was sexually abused in the home. So that was what led to sex for me in general. Because I think I would have preferred to take my time in that sense, but it was taken away from me. So with that, I noticed that the youth that I work with now, often than not, it's never about what happened to the youth. It's more so, why are they pregnant? It's always so much of the scolding instead of who the youth is and what happened to them that they're in this predicament. It's still always the same thing. And then I've witnessed the other side of things where youth in care are purposely becoming pregnant just so they can get housing. So it's been such a hard thing to tackle. And then the Roe v. Wade thing plays a whole nother part that I don't even think we are ready for. So yeah, I don't want to take up like all of the time, but yes, thank you.
Oh my goodness, you touched base on so many things I wanted to talk about, but for the sake of time, and also I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. It was definitely powerful.
The Child Welfare Virtual Expo, CWVE, logo displays and is followed by this statement. This video was developed for the Child Welfare Virtual Expo by the Capacity Building Center for States and is sponsored by the Children's Bureau. Its content does not necessarily reflect the views and policies of the Children's Bureau.